So this chart was created in Excel in order to determine the critical path and start scheduling the actual workforce, how it's going to be applied to the different tasks that are here. So let's take a look at the schedule. First, I've ID'd the tasks numbers 1 to 21 and their corresponding names, exposed siding, install flashing, and so on. Then I've indicated the duration in hours and the predecessor. So the predecessor simply means that before I can start task number 2, task number 1 has to be completed. And this table that's generated here is indicating just that. So task number 1 has to be finished before task number 2 starts. And then task number 2 has to be completed before task number 3, and so on. So the numbers that are inside the boxes are the task numbers. The numbers before them are the predecessors. And there's also a float. So what's a float? Well, for instance, when we're looking at task number 14, task number 13 has to be completed, but also task number 3. So this task number 3 must be finished before 14 can start. So when we're looking at task number 13, it requires task 11, but also task 12. So those two events must occur before we can start 13. We also have, in this particular case, where tasks number 18 and 21 can begin after 17 is completed, but 21's got a bit of a float at the end as well. So how does this help us? Well, here are the number of hours that all the different operations are going to be taking, and these are the 4 individuals that are going to be working on the project. We decided that a crew of 4 would be best because that seems to be the maximum number that we have here. So we look at each task and determine what is the order of operations that is the most efficient. And we've highlighted this in red, and that identifies what's called the critical path. These things must occur one after the other to create the shortest timeline for this project. The floats can fill in the gaps and the pieces in between. So let's see how this will work with our particular project. Okay. Item number 4 here, which is to dig the holes, has to be performed, and there are 4 people involved. So we know at the beginning of this project that item number 4 is going to be fulfilled by each of the 4 individuals over the first 3 hours of the course of the day. That's what we've allocated in terms of people for that particular event. So all of these tasks here, all of them here, we need to move forward at the end of task number 4 because they can't occur before that. So I'm going to remove them from here, and I'm going to click in this location and paste them right there. So I know that this is the minimum time now that those events can start. Well, that also applies to building the beam because all the individuals are busy. So I'm going to remove it from here. I'm just pressing Control X and moving it to this location. So I know that this is my new timeline based on that particular hour. You'll notice that the floats have shrunk because as we start moving these tasks forwards, the floats get affected by them. So now let's take a look at item number 5. Item number 5 only requires 1 person. And at that particular operation, I'm going to put less in charge of that one. There's item number 5. But what other operation requires the other people? So 1 person's being used here. I've got 4 in total. There's 2 here, and there's 2 here. So it doesn't matter which one I pick. That's the number of people that are going to be, or the minimum number of people that are going to be used for that operation. So let's take a look at 6. 6 requires 2 people. So I'm going to allocate 6 here, and 6 there, 6 here, and 6 there. See, we must make sure that anything along the critical path is accounted for, and then we'll move those other individuals for the different allocations of hours. So what about task number 7? It requires 2 people as well. And I can later on change who the individuals are based on what I want or who I want to work together with. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. And task number 8 requires 3 people. So this one's a pretty heavy one. 8, 8, 8. And it looks like 3 hours long. There we go. So now let's try filling in some of the gaps, and we'll adjust this as we go along. These are 2 people jobs. So task number 1, remove siding. Task number 2 is install flashing. So if we look at 4 people for the duration of this being an hour each, so that's 4 people for 1 hour. If we take a look at what I have here, I've got 3 hours. So could I have 3 people working on exposing the siding? Absolutely. And then I only need 1 person, and if this is 2 people for that, so I can put in task number 1 here and 1 here. That takes care of that one. And this task here requires how many people? 2 minimum. Okay, so this I'm going to put in here and use task number 2 there and task number 2 there, and that takes care of those 2. The beam requires a minimum of 2 people, so I don't have room for somebody else to move into that location. So I'm going to take this right away and change it to here. There we go. What about task number 3? Task number 3 requires 3 people. This one's a tough one because to attach the ledger I need 3 people. Well, I've only got 2 here. I've only got 2 here. I've got 3 here, here, and here, but realistically speaking, I can't use that. I need another set of hands. So that's a challenge because we require 3 people for this one. We only require 2 for this. So where could I put it in? Sometimes what we have to do is adjust the critical path to allow for an event to occur. In this case, we need that event to occur. This is build beam. It requires 2 people. I can have at least for 2 hours here, those 2 being used to build that beam. So I'm going to put 12 here, 12 here, 12 here, 12 here. This requires 3 people, so I can't use this anywhere along this timeline. So Control X. I'm going to move right to this one, Control V to paste that in. I don't have a float there anymore, so I'll paint it as white. So I need one more hour of event number 12. This requires 3 people. Okay, I got to leave it. So where are we short? Are we short anywhere? Yeah, here. That requires 3 people. I've only got 2. This is for attaching the ledger, and this is where we got to look at and say, what can we actually realistically get done here? Well, if 3 people are working on the ledger to a certain point, then what we can do is say, okay, we're going to switch to 2 people for a longer time period. So instead of 3 for 1 hour, we're going to use 2 for how many hours? Well, we're going to have to be able to use 2 people for 2 hours. And again, nothing in here seems to work for that time period right now, and we're going to have to move that. I do have something in here that's more critical. No, I'm going to move that out because it has a float that can come all the way out to here. So let's do this. I'm going to get rid of that here. And I'm going to move that at least down to this point because here we can have 3 people. And I'll remove these events here. And that's number 3. Okay. Remember, I need 3 for this. How many do I need for number 9? For number 9, I only need 1 person. Oh, those 2 line up nicely. So here I can put in 3. And then I can put in 9 for 3 people. So I've used all 4 people. I can't have this one here. So once again, I'm going to move that 1 more hour ahead. And you notice my float is getting cut off completely. Here, this is already done. Now, you can still see that there's a float available, but hopefully I'll have that task done in that one. What about task 10? Requires 2 people. What about task 12? Requires 2 people. Okay, I can do 10 and 12 at the same time here. So 10, 10, 12, 12. Great. So that is going to be finished before task 13 starts. What does task 11 require? It requires only 2 people. What about 13? 13 requires 2 people, but I can't complete 13 until 11 is done. So here are my options. 2 people on 11 for half an hour, cut the post, or I can have all 4 people on there and therefore cut this timeline in half. So why don't we do that? Number 11. 11, 11, 11, 11, and instead of it being a half hour, it's now only going to take me, what, a quarter hour, 15 minutes to get done. There, I've cut the timeline down a bit. Now it shows 0.3 only because it's rounding it off. If I move that over, it will show that. So everything gets done. The only thing I'm missing here, or I have here, is basically the student that's helping out, Jazz, is missing an hour here and missing a little time there. That could be all the cleanup and everything else that needs to be done. So let's take a look at this project from the perspective of time. So we can see this has taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10 hours to get to this point. Okay, well, let's take a look at the day and the events that are occurring. When I look at tasks number 8 and 9, 8 is pour concrete posts, 9 is set saddles. Those have to occur within the same day. It'd be ideal to finish the day right here so that we can then what? Have everything dry for the next day. So if I can finish the day here, that would be perfect. So let's take a look at what that day would look like. And I'm going to put in a right border here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-hour day. Well, that's not unusual for landscaping. So a 10-hour day means that we can cut another day at another time, with something else. Now, we haven't allocated lunch in this time period. We haven't allocated any breaks or any other sort of things. So this is something that we're either going to spend 10 hours doing, or we're going to be spending less than that, minus 3.5, so 6.5 hours doing. It all depends on how the day goes, but we know we're not going to start pouring the concrete until it is completed. So at this point, what you need to do is go through the rest of the assignment, fill out the number of hours, and wherever it allocates 2 people to a job for a certain time period, so for instance, number 17 is 3 people, well, maybe we need to get 4 in there, but then we've got to determine how many hours. So if 3 is 6 hours, that's 18. How much is 4 people? Well, you divide 4 into 18 to determine how many hours this should take, and that will change the critical path as we work through this project. All right, this is the project you're going to complete. This will give you the total number of hours that are going to be allocated to this. You won't be paying half hours, but if everybody finishes a 6-hour day, that's all that you're paying is for 6 hours. It all depends on how it works at the end of each period. So this will be the calculation of hours as well as the duration of the project, and that will all be added to the actual bid sheet that you're going to put together for this project.